Hi y'all, welcome to my talk about Next.js static site generation with Cosmic Headless CMS. I really want to quickly show you what we're going to be doing by the end of this talk. Here's the blog that we'll be able to deploy on Vercel and use Cosmic CMS as a data backend to hold all of our blog posts. So here's a little preview of what it will look like in Vercel. And here is Cosmic CMS. I wanted to show you really quickly here, like we're going to be able to actually edit these posts in Cosmic and see it show up in our Vercel deployed web app. And we're going to use webhooks here to be able to do that. Whenever a post gets edited, we'll see that new version right on Vercel, which is quite neat. So without further ado, on to the talk. Welcome to my talk, Use Next.js Static Site Generation with Cosmic Headless CMS. My name is Alec Brunelle, and I'm a developer advocate for Cosmic CMS. So a little bit more about me. I am a full stack developer, I guess professionally, for the past 5 years, and I've been using Next.js for over 2 years now, both professionally and with some side projects. So what are we going to cover today? Well, the first thing we need to cover is what are the differences between a real-time website and also a static website. How we're going to use those new static site generation features that were introduced in Next 9.3, I think it was, how to use those. Then we're also going to look at why consider using a content management system, so a CMS, with a static website. Then we're going to look into what's a headless CMS, kind of a curveball in CMS there. And then we're going to look into how we can integrate Cosmic CMS, which is one that there are many CMSs out there, but that's the one we're going to look at today, and how to integrate that into a Next.js app. So who this talk is for? I would say this talk is for people that maybe have a little bit of React experience. They're getting into Next.js. They don't really have a full, they haven't really heard about the static site generation features that may have been introduced into Next. Also, it could be for people who are just wondering, like, why do people use a CMS? Maybe look at Headless CMS. They're looking at Headless CMS solutions, and they're kind of like, well, why do I even need this? And how that all relates to Next. So the problem here we're going to try to solve together are you need to make a website. That's really it. Of course, we're going to use Next.js. This is Next.js Conf. So let's frame it like that. So right at the get-go, now they're using Next.js, you really have to pick two paths to go down. You have two options. One is, are we going to make a real-time app? And one is, are we going to make a static app? So let's go over the differences here. Real-time website, you have an example, like maybe that's that whole term web application. That's sort of what that was coined after, is these real-time websites, dynamic content. Example being like a social network, so like Facebook or Google Plus. Shout out to Google Plus. Or a chat application. Think of like WhatsApp, whatever. So this is where the content is actually going to be fetched on page load for a page. So for instance, like if someone spins up your Facebook wall and all the posts get spun up, someone actually loads that Facebook wall, well, there's actually a process running on a server, grabbing all those posts on the wall in real time, compiling that HTML and sending it off to the browser. So for instance, the HTML is compiled on each request. So it's real time. And just as I said, like it requires a process to run on the server. For instance, Next.js, like you'll need to make a real-time app with Next.js, you actually need Node.js, running on the server. So here's an example, just really quickly, like Facebook, go delete a post. Everyone else can't see that post immediately. Like it's been deleted. Every request is real time. So there's a difference here with static websites. With static websites, you have some different use cases here. For example, a blog is a decent use case for a static website. A band website where you might be, so a band website, what is that? Well, it could be where you list all your concert dates and you're only going to be editing this content maybe once every few days, unless you're a really popular band and you're playing like every day. And if that's the case, good on you. Or e-commerce store. Well, for that one, it could be where you're only adding products like every few days. Maybe the stock changes, so you want to change out of stock. But there's not stuff where the content is changing so rapidly, and like the use case of the website is that to see that content like be very, very up to date. So here you have the data for the website is actually just being fetched at build time. So when the website is actually built and compiled, the full website's compiled, that's when we're going to be doing our data fetching. Here, the HTML so when I say compile at build time, I mean all the HTML is actually being generated and compiled with that data you just fetched. It's portable. So this is like very old school, where you might, if you're an old school developer, or you might remember like back in the days, just like dropping some files on a server and just it working. That's sort of what it is. Like there's no process you need to actually run on a server here. You just have some files on a server, and you can actually, if you have a proper sort of DNS set up in front of that server, you can just have people like hit that server, like a browser hit that server, and then the website just works. So here is just like a really quick example with a blog here. This site might only be compiled and built when a new blog post is added, because that's the only content that's really changing here. So as you can see, when we compare these two use cases, compare these two technologies, you can see there's plenty of use cases for both. So how does Next.js achieve both of these? Well, historically speaking, until really recently, maybe a few months ago, Next.js has only been a framework for building these real-time data apps. But now, after Next 9.3, they now have some features to actually build a full static website. So here's an example of a page where we're just going to display the GitHub stars of the Next.js repo. So what it's doing here is get initial props is that special Next.js function where it will run on the server as a network request comes in, and it can enable server-side rendering, all that jazz. It's actually being run on render time. So here we saw that, so get initial props was before Next 9.3. Now we have this sort of split, right? Now we need a function that is going to support our real-time data apps and a function that's going to support our static site generation. As I just said, that. Splitting those two functions, as I said. So here we have, after Next 9.3, we have one function to do server-side rendering, or an at render time data fetching call. Here it's called get server-side props. And this actually does everything similarly to get initial props, running at render time. So here again, just to reiterate for this example, you're getting the start count from this API at render time. So how do we enable static site generation? Also, to keep this in mind, like Next.js, you can actually mix and match this per page, which is one of the unique things with Next.js. So here we have an SSG page, the exact same page as before, but as we notice here, get server-side props is actually get static props now. Get static props runs at build time. So how is that different? Well, for this, we can see here, you get the start count at build time. Very different. Excuse me. Basically, when you go to get that page, what's the page called? Page SSG. When this renders, you're not getting the star count on that render time. If stars were to accumulate on that GitHub repo, which I'm sure it is very fast, you're only getting the star count when you built the website, not as you got that page. So when you're building a static site, there are some unique things to think about, and so we'll go through those. So the page data, which we're sort of already alluded to, the different page routes in your application, the builds, like where you're doing the build, when are you building, and also there's some unique things when it comes to actually developing the website locally, and also previewing draft content for your in, like, let's say your blog, you have a post that you don't actually want published yet to production. So first we'll go over page data. Here we sort of already touched on this already. This is the data actually needed to render the page. That's quite important. So examples here would be like a blog post or a concert date. For the e-commerce store, it could be like a product. There's a couple of different places where the data can actually be stored. Here we have, let's say you don't use a CMS, like you're not using any external service. You can actually just store all the data on the Git repo. For this instance, like to actually edit some content, so you're saying you're editing your blog post, well, you're actually going to be doing it like actually to the files inside the Git repo, which could be a use case for certain people. So just like the GitHub stars example we went through, well, for that one, it's actually just an external API, and that's where the data is being held. For this one, CMS, well, that's actually just an external service where, so CMS, what does that stand for? Content Management Service. It could be something like Cosmic, where you have different people editing that content, and that's going to be fetched into your website. Here's an example here, like for a blog, let's say. So you have posts, author, different objects, and for posts here, we can just edit this post, and let's say we save it, or we publish it, sorry. When you go and build, you're actually going to get this content. So the next thing we have to think about is page routes. Here we have the different page routes. Could be like myblog.com/post/myfirstblogpost. This is important to think about because the difference here with static websites is that all the page routes are predetermined. Of course, like with some real-time data apps, you could say like if a new resource is created and like Facebook post number 123, well, you could have a route based on 123. It's a real-time data app. That resource could have been generated a minute ago. We need to have those dynamic URLs. Well, with SSG, it's a little different, where because you're building it, compiling all the HTML prior, like you have the ability to actually predetermine all those URLs prior. Builds. So this is the next thing that you have to think about. For a build, I've referenced a little bit before, whereas like the build is actually where and when your data is actually going to get fetched to. Next thing you have to think about is actually developing and previewing your content. So example being here, like you publish some content, you have to think about sort of where it's actually going to be viewed. Like by default, on most CMSs, you'll just publish the content. Next time you build, that content's going to be viewable everywhere. So you go build on Vercel, then it's going to be querying that content you just published. And then their use case is the preview mode for draft content, so that you can make sure that whatever you're editing on maybe that CMS, or whatever you're editing, even locally, you want to know what it looks like. Yeah, so now that we've covered static site generation, like Next.js, so why would you want to use a CMS, really? I kind of talked about this before, but I briefly went over it, but let's go into it a little bit more deeper here. For a CMS, it's really for your managers of your content. So this could possibly be writers, marketers, content creators. Like they don't really want to be using Git and like pushing code to a Git website, Git repo, or messing around with the database, for instance. So just for example, right? Like you could be a freelancer and you're tasked with like building a website, and then you want to hand that website off to your client, and well, it'd be fantastic for them to use some sort of thing like a CMS to like manage that content. Well, so what does headless CMS mean? Well, this really just means like traditionally CMSs have also handled rendering the content that is being edited. Well, for a headless CMS, it just means like you can query it through an API, really. Like it doesn't have any capabilities to actually render the content. It's just like a management database where you can like go in, change some edits, like edit some blog posts, and then have something else, our next step, to actually go and handle like rendering the content. So after just like a quick break on my part, we will start to get through a walkthrough on how to get Next.js up and running with Cosmic CMS. Okay, so we're back. As you can see, it's a little bit more dark outside, but surely we're chugging on. So next thing I wanted to do was walk through a Next.js app using the static site generation features, and then using Cosmic CMS to actually hold the data. Right. So what we're going to go through really quickly is a very brief overview of Cosmic CMS, developing the Next.js app locally, adding our Next.js SSG bits, and deploying it with a Vercel service, and then also just using a basic webhook to get a little bit more hands-off approach. So first thing, Cosmic CMS. So once you go to the web page, you can see like an actual image here of like, oh, okay, so I actually get my data here. But one of the cool things about Cosmic is you can get up and running really quickly with something called starter apps. And with this, you can filter by use case. You can filter with like actually what sort of framework you want to use. But obviously today we're looking for a Next.js app. So this one we're gonna play with today. It's just a Next.js really basic blog, as you can see from the images here. So it's pretty basic. Just has the index page with like a hero post, and you can see like more stories in the bottom of that. So what you can do here is actually just install this app right into your Cosmic account. And what that does, it just creates some sane object types. For example, like a blog post, and maybe if you have different authors, like it has an author's object data type, put some demo content in there. You can see a demo of it, and you can also see the code. So after you install that app, you go through a little walkthrough, and then right after that, you'll come through to a bucket screen. Here, buckets and Cosmic are basically just namespaces for your data. So I made one here. I used that app to name one here, Next.js Conf. Let's go here. And it says, okay, I have some posts and authors. So when you go to your posts here, the first post I have is learn how to pre-render pages using SSG with Next. There you go. So here I have like the title, the slug, content, what have you. This is kind of regular CMS stuff. And yeah, so very minimalistic interface, which is really easy to use. Yeah, so let's go through next thing, which is actually developing it locally. Yeah, so then I went in and I cloned the repo, put it down, and or pulled it down, and then started running it after like installing dependencies with Yarn on 3000. So let's click that, and you can see here, okay, no post to show, connect me to an API. Because I took all the Next.js SSG bits out so we can go through them. So if you've used Next before, all of your sort of routes are linked to React components inside the pages folder. And so here we have pages index, so that's our index page. And here we have our, that's that content that that's that div you just saw in the browser, which is if nothing is defined, no posts are defined, then it'll show this, or it'll actually show like what we actually want to see here, right? Which is the hero post and no more posts. As you can see here, there's no parent component passing in the props or anything, and there's no function to give it data. And so let's add that back. So here, let's add that import back. So here, this is should be very familiar with you now. It's the get static props method, which runs, well, when you're locally developing, it'll just keep running as you like reload the page, but this actually only runs on build time. Here you can see it's using a function called get all posts from home. And if we look into that, it's just a really simple API call using the Cosmic NPM module to grab our data from Cosmic. So here, when we go here, get all posts for home, we're just saying like, give me the title, slug, metadata, created that for all the posts, return those, give it as props. Let's go back to Firefox here, reload the page. Okay, everything's running. I get that, I get my blog posts and learn how to pre-render pages, what have you. Next thing is the actual slug post page here, where I got my posts, and then I can get some more posts at the bottom there. Preview mode we're not going to cover today, but same thing here. Like without that function, without any functions to give it data, I click into this 404, of course. So let's add that back. Same thing with this. It's using some modules that are pre-built for you to show you how to get some data. But here, like get static paths, getting all the posts with the slugs, returning that to Next.js, so that Next.js app actually knows like all the slugs. For this, it's going to take get static props for this post is like going to get that slug that came in, and based on the file name being like a dynamic file name, it's going to use that slug to grab the data from the API, which is the Cosmic API, transfer that markdown to HTML so that I can actually render in React. Let's save that. Let's go back, and we're up and running. Okay, I just did that quickly. So deployment with Vercel, I went ahead and committed this code to a GitHub repo, because that's how we're going to link our project over to Vercel. Here on my Vercel dashboard, there's a big button called Import Project. I'm going to import a Git repository. I'm going to grab that URL, the GitHub repository, and we're going to go in. So yeah, it detected that we're in Next.js app, of course. So for environment variables, I need to go in and create some environment variables here. So these are the ones that the Cosmic NPM module needs to go and know which account and bucket to go and get your data from. So these are actually in the repo as an example, but I just copied this. Also, I'm going to be rotating these keys if you have any ideas. Steal my precious demo content. So now that I got all these environment variables in, let's deploy that. And it should be pretty quickly, but I'll skip ahead I'll skip ahead because this is just going to be boring log output. Okay, right, so we are good to go. And we're live with a real URL in production, which was pretty quick. So now let's open up the dashboard to that. So one thing what our app doesn't do right now is deploy when someone edits some content in Cosmic, which is like something that's really awesome to have. Right now it only deploys a new version when a new commit to master is made. So let's go to settings, Git integration. This is where the webhooks are. So deploy hooks. We need some, Cosmic needs to send a HTTP request over to Vercel to say, hey, I have some new edited content. Can you please go and deploy again? Because then when the deploy runs, it's going to build, it's going to call Cosmic for get that new data. Git branch name is master, of course. You can have different branches, whatever, maybe for some different deployments, but here, okay, Vercel gives me an endpoint here that I need to hit. Let's copy that. Once we go back to Cosmic, I can go to settings, webhooks, and I already made one here, but let's just get that going here. And I made an event here, so object edited and published, it's going to hit this endpoint. So let's go to post. Let's try to post one here. Next.js conf. What up? Let's publish that. Let's go back to Vercel over here, deployments, and we're building. And I'll skip ahead really quickly here again, so give us some time. And we're back. Okay, so 25 seconds. Great. Let's visit that. And we have the new content. Perfect. I hope you learned some new things about Next.js SSG and everything, and I hope you had a good time listening to my talk, and thank you very much for listening and watching and following along. Thank you.